This conference will now be recorded.
Hello students, I'm Dr. Divya from TeenEinstein. So today we are moving to the second part of chapter 30, Organism and Populations, Organisms and Population, part 2. Okay, this chapter, this is coming under ecology. We have already discussed in part 1 about all this ecology and all. So in ecology, we are studying about the relationship of living organism. Relationship of living organism among themselves and their relation with the abiotic and biotic components. Right? Among the organisms, what all relations are there, how they are related, and their relation with the abiotic and biotic components and their environment. So all these things are coming under ecology part. So this is concerned with 4 levels of biological organization: organism, population, community, then biomes. Organisms, population, communities, and biomes. So we had discussed about this habitat in last part. In the last class, we just mentioned about habitat. What is habitat, or what do you mean by a habitat? Habitat means the place where organisms make their home. Habitat means the place where the organisms make their home. So this habitat will be having all environmental conditions, and these environmental conditions that will be having important role in the survival of that organism, right? In high temperature region, see, all environmental condition, environment will be having different conditions like high temperature, humidity, pH, all these conditions. Some organisms will be having adaptations, or they can survive in high temperature conditions, or some can survive in polar regions. But all organisms, human beings cannot survive in high temperature condition, very high temperature condition, they can't survive. In polar region, they can't survive. So there will be such kind of adaptations. So each habitat will be having all environmental conditions, and these environmental conditions are very important. They are having very important role in the survival of that organism. A particular group of organisms will be having some specific conditions in that habitat. Only under that condition they can survive. Okay, so such conditions will be there in each habitat. So in everything, it comes like gathering of food, selection of mate, then successful reproduction. In everything, this kind of conditions will be there in each and every habitat. For gathering food, special adaptations will be there, in the sense there will be special a peculiar species will be having its own food gathering techniques, right? And in this in other cases, what is that? In selection of mate, in the selection of a mate of a particular species, that also will be having certain adaptations. So for each and everything, a habitat will be having specific terms and conditions. There will be conditions for each group of organisms. They'll be having specific conditions. They can mate with this kind of organisms, or their pair, how they'll select their pair, or how they'll mate, the selection of mate. Then for reproduction, they need certain climatic conditions or certain conditions. So such kind of conditions will be there. Then what about plants? In the case of plants, what makes a good habitat in the case of plants? In the case of plants also, there will be some specific conditions even in the case of plants. In the case of plants, a place where there is a good combination of light, air, water, and soil, that should be there, right? Without good soil, that plant won't get proper growth. If it is not growing properly, that can't do photosynthesis. And without the presence of water and light, photosynthesis is impossible. Like, it will be difficult, right? Photosynthetic rate, then transpiration, everything matters. So it depends upon the habitat. Even in the case of plants also, habitat matters a lot. Habitat is having a very, or the conditions of the habitat that is having important role. So when soil condition is good, light intensity, then air, water, everything. For each and everything, there is a specific role in the habitat. So each type of plant grows in different conditions, right? Like desert, in desert specific plants you can see, in grassland you can see particular type of plants. So all these, the plants which are in aquatic environment, they cannot grow in a desert condition, right? Because they need water, more water. They are specific, or they are getting adapted to that aquatic environment, right? So such organisms or such plants and animals, each organism is having different condition in that habitat, and the best one that can survive. So you know about different types of habitat. There are different types of habitat. There are aquatic habitat and terrestrial habitat. Okay, so there are different types of habitat, aquatic habitat and terrestrial habitat. Up to this we have learned in last class. So just to get an idea, I've explained all these points. Then next we are moving to another concept. So now we have an idea about habitat. So in habitat, some key elements are there which makes so much variation in the chemical and physical conditions of habitat. Which are they? Which are those elements which is making variations in the habitat? They are soil, water, light and temperature. Soil, water, light and temperature. Which are the elements that makes variation in the chemical and physical conditions of habitat? They are temperature, water, light and soil. They are the elements which is making changes or variations in the physical and chemical conditions of habitat. So soil, water, light and temperature, they are very important elements which is making variation in the physical and chemical conditions of different habitats. So these temperature, water, soil and light, they are the abiotic factors. Okay, they are the abiotic factors. These temperature, water, light and soil, they are called as abiotic factors. So these physico-chemical factors or the abiotic factors, these physico-chemical factors, they are otherwise called as abiotic factors. These physico-chemical factors or abiotic factors are making variation in habitat, right? We have told they are the major elements which are making variations in habitat. But all changes are not only from these abiotic factors. So there are some other biotic factors which are working as a reason for the variation in the habitat. Not only the abiotic factors, there are some other factors are also there which is making variation in the habitat. So there are some biotic factors. Not only abiotic factors, some biotic factors are also there which is making variation in the habitat. Okay, which are they? Biotic factors in the sense pathogens, parasites, then competitors and predators. Predators and competitors, parasites and pathogens. These are called as biotic factors. So there are abiotic and biotic factors. So both these abiotic factors and biotic factors, both are becoming the reason for the variation in the habitat. Okay. So biotic factors like pathogens, parasites, predators and competitors, all these are becoming the reason for variation in habitat. Along with the biotic factors, abiotic factors are also contributing for the variations. Okay. So all the organisms will be going through all these conditions, or they'll be facing variations in biotic and abiotic conditions. They'll be facing different variations in the physicochemical as well as the biotic components. So these variations in all these factors they are going through. So after some time or over a period of time, these organisms will go through natural selection. Natural selection, we know what is natural selection. So they will evolve some kind of adaptations to survive, and for the reproduction also they will find out, like see, continuously some temperature variations are coming in one habitat. So then slowly the organisms which are working or which are living in that habitat or in that environment, they will get or they'll get adapted to such conditions to survive or to tolerate that temperature variation. They'll get adapted. Some can survive in that temperature variations also. So those organisms, they'll reproduce. Other organisms cannot exist. They will die. And the surviving organisms, they'll reproduce and they will make next generations. Right? So that is called as natural selection. Those who can survive, that is selected by the nature, and others will die. Other organisms which cannot survive will die. So they will evolve. Such organisms which can survive or naturally selected organisms, those organisms will develop some kind of adaptations to survive in such conditions. So for reproduction, then these organisms will reproduce and they will survive in that kind of habitat. Okay. Then next point is niche. So how to define the ecological niche? Habitat and niche, they are the common word which you can read together. So habitat, we have already discussed now. Habitat means where that organism is living and where it is reproducing. They will develop, depends upon the variations in the habitat, that organism will develop some kind of adaptations to survive and reproduce in that habitat. Okay. Then next is niche. So how we can define ecological niche? It is the total amount of the adaptations of an organismic unit. It is the total amount of adaptations. All different kind of adaptations will get developed depending upon the variations in the habitat, right? So the total amount of adaptations of an organismic unit, that is called as niche. So what is the difference between environment of an organism and its niche? Niche includes the capacity of organism. Okay. Excuse me. Niche means that is having, or that niche is including the capacity of organism to manipulate its environment. Got it? So that involves how we can explain this. This is including, or this is involving the way in which an organism is actually communicating with the environment. Environment means where it is living, that condition. And niche means how the organism is communicating with its environment and how it is using, how the organism is using that environment. Okay, that all together is called as niche. So ecological niche means how or in which way an organism or a species communicating with its habitat and how it is making adaptation to survive in that habitat. That all together, the sum total of all these, that is called as niche. Okay. So what is an habitat? where an organism living, that is called as habitat. So in that habitat variations you can see, according to the variation, that organism will develop some kind of adaptation for the survival. So after surviving, what it will do, it will reproduce to produce the next generation. Then only it can form the species and community and all, right? So then only it can exist. See, if it is not reproducing within that generation, it will get over. There won't be that species of such particular organism in the next generation. So for such things, it is getting reproduced. So for that reason, for the survival, to survive in such conditions, the variations in that habitat, that is developing some kind of adaptations, right? But what does niche? Niche means how or in which way an organism or a species is communicating with the habitat. In which way through with the habitat that organism is communicating, and how and all it is developing that adaptation to survive in that habitat. So the sum total of all this, it is called as niche. Okay. An ecological niche, it is having unique features, and with the help of all these features that can determine how well a species lives and reproduces. Got it? So ecological niche, it is having unique features. Each niche, ecological niche, it is having unique feature. And there are some organisms, and how these organisms are communicating with the environment or with the habitat, and how it is developing adaptations to survive in that habitat, and how it is getting reproduced, and how it is surviving in that habitat. All these, it is depending upon the features of that niche. Okay. Then, so now what and all we have learned, abiotic and biotic factors are there which are making variations in the habitat. So with the help of these, or depending upon these variations, organism will develop some kind of adaptations. Then after a period of time, all organisms that will go through natural selection, and with organisms which are having adaptations to survive in that habitat, they will survive and they can reproduce also. Then the organism has invariably defined range of conditions that it can tolerate. Then diversity in the resources it utilizes, and a distinct functional role in the ecological system. All these together comprise its niche. How that organism is communicating with its habitat, and how it is developing different adaptations for the survival, and how it is getting reproduced, and existence of all organism in that particular habitat. So all together, it is called as niche. Next, we said many major abiotic factors are there. They are temperature, light, water, and soil. So now we are going to discuss all these about temperature, light, water, and soil. So let us discuss one by one. So first is temperature. First one is temperature. So temperature is the most important factor. It is one of the most important factors concerned about environment. And we know that when season changes, there will be temperature variations also, right? When one season, the summer season and winter season, when the season is changing, there will be temperature variations. Then average temperature that varies or that decreases from equator towards the pole. Average temperature. Okay, on Earth, you know that the average temperature that varies from or that decreases from the equator towards pole. When the temperature, when we are considering temperature from equator to pole side, it is getting decreased. When temperature from in pole side, you can see very less temperature, and when it is coming to equator side, it is getting increased. When we are moving from equator to pole, it is getting decreased. Okay, so that temperature that is getting decreased from equator towards the pole, and in pole the temperature range is from sub-zero. Okay, temperature ranges from sub-zero, and in high altitudes it will be above 50 degree. Like in desert and all, during summer season it will be above 50 degree, right? Then thermal springs and deep sea hydrothermal vents. Thermal springs and deep sea hydrothermal vents. They are unique habitats, and the average temperature in that habitat that exceeds 100 degree. Can you imagine 100 degree? That is the boiling temperature. Anyone can exist or any organism can exist in such temperature? It's difficult. It's very, very difficult. So, thermal springs and deep sea hydrothermal vents, they are unique habitats, and the temperature range that exceeds 100 degree. Thermal spring. What is that? Thermal spring or hot spring, or otherwise it is called as geothermal spring. Okay, there just now we said the temperature is above 100 degree, or that is exceeding 100 degree centigrade. Thermal spring and deep sea hydrothermal vent. So first let's see what is thermal spring. Thermal spring or hot spring, or otherwise it is called as geothermal spring. It is by the emergence of groundwater. Okay, groundwater emergence, and that groundwater is geothermally heated. On the surface of Earth, you can get groundwater which is geothermally heated. In newspaper and all, you can see in some places and all, like hot water is coming, right? So that and all due to the thermal spring effect. Means geothermally heated water, it is emerging. Okay, so such conditions are called as thermal spring, and the temperature range, it is that exceeds 100 degree. Then next, another term which we have used is hydrothermal vent. Hydrothermal vents, they're like fissure on sea floor, fissure from which again the same geothermally heated water, that geothermally heated water discharges. This is fissure on the sea floor. Actually, this is commonly found in volcanically active places. Okay, volcanically active places, you can see this. So we know that in all these conditions, the average temperature exceeds 100 degree centigrade in thermal spring and hydrothermal vents. In both, the temperature is above 100 degree. And we know that, like for example, we can say, we said or some organisms which can, the temperature is an important factor for the living organism. So in different temperature conditions are there. That's what we said now. So you know that some trees, like for example, you can take mango tree that cannot grow in Germany, Canada and all. For the flowering, mango tree flowering, we need temperature. So in South India, you can see it's easily flowering because of the climatic condition, and the major role, there is a major role for temperature in the flowering of mango. Okay. So in such Germany, Canada and all, temperature is low. So mango trees and all won't grow properly. Then snow leopard, they are not found in Kerala forest. Okay. So from these examples, you can make out that importance of temperature in the living organisms. So some organisms are having, or they are getting adapted to certain condition where they can live. So the importance of temperature in the life of an organism, whether it is a plant or animal, there is an important role for temperature in the life of an organism. Or now you know that the significance of temperature in living organism. So the temperature affects the enzymatic activity. Okay. So for living organism, temperature affects the kinetics of enzyme, and thereby that controls the functions of organisms. See, in human body or the animal body, you can see several enzymatic activities, right? So that depends upon the temperature. So temperature is having very good role in the enzymatic activity. So body temperature, that also matters. So that controls the physiological functions of organism and metabolic activity, everything. So for living organism, temperature affects the kinetics of enzymatic activities. Then, and that's how it is controlling the metabolic activities. Then there are some other organisms which can tolerate wide range of temperature. Different types of organisms are there which can live in narrow range of temperature, and some organisms which can live in wide range of temperature. So such type of organism, they are called, which can tolerate wide range of temperature, they are called as eurythermal. Eurythermal, they are the organism which can survive in wide range of temperature. But most of the organisms, they are surviving in a narrow range of temperature. Only some group, a few organisms that can survive under wide range of temperature, they are called as eurythermal, but majority, they are restricted to narrow range of temperature. They are called as stenothermal. Okay, these terms you should note down, eurythermal and stenothermal. Then based on the range of temperature, the geographical distribution of organism, that is also depending upon the temperature range, right? Each organism will be, or they are having the adaptation to survive under certain temperature range. So if it is going below that and above that, that particular species of organism cannot survive. So what they will do, wherever they are having, or the adaptable temperature is there, only in that region such kind of organism, even it is a plant or animal, whatever may be, it can grow under certain temperature or within a range of temperature. So the geographical distribution of organism, that is also depending upon the range of temperature in which that organism is able to survive. So nowadays you can see temperature variation, atmospheric temperature variations also, right? That indicates climate change. So climatic conditions are also getting changed. That temperature is also getting varied. So temperature is most important ecologically relevant environmental factor. So the average temperature on land, that is seasonally, that varies. Then temperature is having very high, or it is significant in the living organism because that affects the kinetics of enzyme, and through that it is controlling the metabolic activity and physiological functions of organism. So some organisms that can survive or they can thrive in a wide range of temperature, they are called as eurythermal, and a vast majority of them, they are restricted to a narrow range of temperature. They are called as stenothermal. So hope now you got an idea about temperature. The next one is water. This is the next most influencing factor of living organism. So we have learned that life originated in water, right? So in desert and all, water availability is very less. So all organisms cannot survive or they cannot live without water. So only those organisms which is having a special adaptation to survive or they can live without water or within with very less water. The availability of very less water within that condition which an organism can live or which is having such kind of adaptations, only that can survive there. So not only the survival of adapted organism, the productivity and the distribution of plants, that is also depending upon water, right? But this doesn't have a meaning that organism living in water, they won't face any problems because they are getting plenty of water. Aquatic organisms, they are getting plenty of water, right? So we are thinking in such a way that those plants or organisms which are living in water, they won't face such issues, water related issues. But this is not correct. They are also facing water related issues. How they are facing such issues? For aquatic organism, the chemical composition and the pH of water, that also matters. Water means it's not a single component. There are also different components are there. Like pH of water is, that also matters. Then the contents or the composition of that, chemical composition of water. So everything matters. So in inland water, salt concentration or the salinity of water is less than 5. Okay, in inland water, the concentration of salt, it will be less than 5. But in sea water, 30 to 35. Sea water, the salinity will be 30 to 35. In hypersaline, it will go more than 100. Okay, more than 100, it will go in hypersaline. So some organisms, they can live in high salinity. They are called as euryhaline. Euryhaline. Those who can live in wide range of salinity, they are called as euryhaline. Then, but some of the organisms, they can tolerate narrow range of salinity. Some can survive under wide range of salinity. They are called as euryhaline, and the organism which can survive under a narrow range, they are called as stenohaline. So due to the osmotic problem, seawater organisms, they cannot survive in fresh water. That is due to osmotic issues or osmotic problems. And they cannot survive in fresh water. And freshwater organisms, they are also facing difficulties to live in seawater. Okay, so water is a major component that is influencing the life of organism. So in desert and all, only limited organisms can, the water availability is very less. So only the organisms which are having adaptations to survive with less water, only those can survive. And the productivity and distribution of plants, that also heavily dependent on water. You know that wherever water availability is there, only there we will do agriculture practices, right? In desert, all crops won't grow. So the growth and productivity that depends upon water. Water is also a major factor. Okay. So for aquatic organism, the quality, that means the chemical composition and pH of water, that is also very important. And the salt concentration. Salt concentration is less than 5 in land water. In land water, salt concentration is less than 5. In sea water, it is 30 to 35. And hypersaline, that means in lagoons and all, it is above 100. So some organisms, they are tolerant of wide range of salinities. They are called as uri-haline. But some other organisms, they are restricted to narrow range of salinity. That is, they are called as steno-haline. And many freshwater animals, they cannot live for a long in seawater because they got adapted to the freshwater conditions. Okay. And the seawater organism, they cannot survive in fresh water because they want little more saline water. Okay. Next one is light. Light is another important component. So you have already learned that plants are producing food through photosynthesis, that everyone knows, right? From the lower class itself, you are learning photosynthesis, the food production of plants. How plants are producing food, that is through photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is taking place in the presence of light. So for living organism, the major source of light, that is sun. So almost the living organism, the mainly autotrophs, they are producing their own food. They are synthesizing own food, right? So the their light is a major factor. For herbs and shrubs means they are small plants, right? They need very low light for photosynthesis. Why? Because they got adapted like that. They are very small plants. So they will be growing under the shadow of tall trees. So they got adapted in such a way that they can perform photosynthesis under very low light. So many plants, depending upon the sunlight, to meet their photoperiodic requirement for flowering. So they need sunlight for flowering. So in the case of animals also, they are also depending on light because they are also waiting for the seasonal change for migration, then reproduction and all, right? So light availability and temperature on Earth, both are linked because for light availability and temperature, the major source for both, that is sun. So when more sunlight means temperature will be more and their light availability will be more. So temperature also will be more. So in deep ocean, think about deep ocean. Deep ocean, those organisms, they are living in dark, right? The sunlight won't reach there up to that depth. They are living in dark and they are not aware of this source which is called as sun. They are living in dark. They don't know about sun, or they don't know. They don't have any idea about there is a source, light source, which is called as sun. So this solar radiation, it is having UV radiations also. So this UV radiation, it is very harmful. It is very harmful to organisms, right? So marine plants, we said about marine plants. So So marine plants, they are living at different depth of ocean, right? So they do not, they won't be having any facility, or they do not receive all these color components of the visible spectrum. So the vertical and horizontal distribution, which they will receive, the vertical and horizontal distribution of red, green and brown algae. They are limited in part by the availability of sunlight and depending upon the latitude, then sea condition, depth, everything. So the vertical distribution of red, brown and green algae, that can be explained by their accessory photosynthetic pigments. So in the presence of that, see, we have learned about seaweeds and their characteristic colors and all in 11th standard, right? So the accessory pigments like red algae, they'll absorb which one? See, all colors, they are having different, in that spectrum, it is having different wavelength. So it won't reach, all won't reach up to that depth. So only that which are having high wavelength, only those will reach, right? So in deep sea, you won't get everything, only the high wavelength one will reach. So red algae, they extend to the great depth. Okay, the deepest in deep sea, the red algae you can see that will be in high depth, or that will be present in greatest depth. Then green algae have pigments that is absorbing blue and red wavelength. Then that much only about light. So photosynthesis, that is a process that is possible when sunlight is available as a source of energy. Then many small plants like herbs and shrubs, I told, they are growing in forest and they are adapted to photosynthesis optimally under very low light condition, because already they got adapted enough to do their photosynthesis under the shadow of tall trees. So many plants, they are depending upon the sunlight for their photoperiodic requirement for flowering. And the availability of light on land, that is closely linked to the temperature, because sun is the source, major source for both the light availability and the temperature. Okay, so spectral quality of solar radiation, that is also very important for life. Then UV component of the spectrum, that is very harmful for many organisms, and all the color components of the visible spectrum are not available for marine plants, because marine plants, they are in different depth of ocean. So all these color components of this visible spectrum, that won't be able to reach in that certain depth, because there are different wavelengths for each color components, right? So which are having high wavelength, that will reach in different depth of ocean. And next we are moving to soil. You know the importance of soil. So the nature and properties of soil in different places vary. In different places, you can see different types of soil. In sea, coastal area, you can see sandy soil, right? So like that, depending upon the place, that soil quality or soil nature, that varies. So the nature and properties of soil in different places vary, and that is depending upon, on what and all it is depending. It is depending upon the climate, then the weathering process, then that whether soil is transported or sedimentary and how soil development occurred. Based on all these things, so the nature and properties of soil that is different in different places. It is depending upon the climate, then weathering process, then whether the soil is transported or that is sedimentary, and how soil is developed or how that development procedure, how that occurred. So the characteristics of the soil, such soil composition, grain size and aggregation, then percolation and water holding capacity of soil. Okay, everything is very important. So soil composition, then grain size and aggregation that determine the percolation and water holding capacity. Water holding capacity, in short form we can write it as WHC of soil. Water holding capacity, the percolation and water holding capacity of soil, that is determined by soil composition, grain size and aggregation. That determines the percolation and water holding capacity of the soil. So all these characteristics that along with the pH, then mineral composition, then topography, that determine the vegetation in that area. Which type of vegetation is present in that area, that depends upon the soil nature. That not only that, pH of the soil, then mineral composition, everything. All these soil, each and every component of soil, that determines the type of vegetation which is present in that area. So if pH is more, some plants or some vegetation that can survive in high pH or some can in low pH, and mineral composition. So all these depends upon the nature of soil. So based on that vegetation, their animals will be present, right? Those organisms which can survive with such vegetation for their food and survival, such vegetation is enough, or they can get adapted to such vegetation, such type of, or that type of animals will exist in that area, right? Then the aquatic environment. In the aquatic environment, that sediment characteristics that determines the type of benthic animals and which type of animals, benthic animals, can survive or thrive there. That depends upon the sediment characteristic. Okay, which type of benthic animal is present in that aquatic animal, that determines the, so that depends upon the sediment characteristic. Okay, so that's all about soil. So these are the 4 major abiotic factors: temperature, water, light and soil. These are the major factors. So different organisms are adapted to different physiological ecology. So it depends upon the type of organism which is present in particular habitat or particular area, particular environment. That depends upon the conditions of that habitat. So that organisms will get evolved or they'll get adapted to optimize the survival and for the reproduction in particular habitat. So through natural selection, they'll get selected, on there comes the survival of the fittest. The fittest one will survive and they will reproduce and they will produce the species, group of organisms and community, and that's how organisms are forming or they are getting evolved. So there are many abiotic factors which are affecting the environment. They are temperature, water, light and soil. So these are the main topics. Then how these respond to the abiotic factors. That's what we are going to discuss in the next class, because that is the main topic and that needs minimum 1 hour. So up to this, hope everything is clear. So next class we will be learning about how these organisms are reacting to this. Okay. So hope everything is clear up to this. If you have any doubt, you can ask me in the next class. You want me to repeat anything? Okay, hope up to this it's clear. Thank you.